Hi, I'm Amy Koranek. I'm in the Scupey Design Studio to talk to you about a great subject, how to use up scrap clay. And my motto is, when life gives you scrap clay, make something. So I'm going to show you how to organize your scrap clay so it's easy to use, and then what you can do with it. So first off, I want you to know that in my studio I have what I call two kinds of scrap clay. I have crappy scrappy, which is scrap clay that when you mix it all together you're going to get something that's maybe not really visually appealing. Generally, when you mix a lot of colors together of scraps, you're going to get something that's in the brown or gray range. And what I do with that is I use it to clean up my work surface. I even pick up glitter, mica powder. I've even used it to scrub permanent marker off my workstation. And I also use it to clean my pasta machine rollers. And sometimes when you'll be using dark colors, you're going to notice that you get some debris from your color on the rollers. And if you have scrap clay on hand, you can just press that through, especially right before you go to a white or a light yellow color, and help clean your rollers. Another thing I do with my crappy scrappy is I use it to clean up all those little bits and pieces of clay that fall out of the roller from time to time and just collect them up. So I always have a piece of crappy scrappy on hand. Now, another thing you can do with this, if you get too much of it, is you can use it to bulk out large items. Like this is a really big pendant piece or a very thick bead. And so you can use this crappy scrappy to make parts of your project that will never be seen. So that's what I call crappy scrappy. My favorite part of scrap, though, is the happy scrappy. And what happy scrappy is colors of clay in sort of clay color families that I have preserved. Like I've done a project and then I have all this left over. I don't have time to work with it right now, so I wrap it up in this plastic deli paper. This kind of paper won't leach the plasticizer out of your clay, so that when you do go to use it, it's still soft and supple. You haven't lost a lot of your good plasticizer quality. So I just store colors that look good together, or maybe remnants of projects, in plastic sheet like this, and then I just use a basket, or you could use a baking tray or a tin pie pan to just kind of layer that up. Here's a whole bunch of one that I did. So that is the happy scrappy, and you'll find yourself so much better equipped to use your scrap clay in projects if you sort it by color, like I'm showing you here, and you don't have to dig through all the little bits and pieces. So that is the difference between happy scrappy and crappy scrappy. First, let's take a look at the varieties of ways that scrap clay, sort of looks and what you can do with it. I like these two samples because these were made from a lot of scrap clay, and if you look at them closely, they actually have a lot of inconsistencies in the surface of the clay, because what happened was the clay actually kind of crackled and spread apart as I pressed it through my pasta machine. And I love the way that you get patterns that you'll never be able to plan. They just happen like spontaneously, and sometimes projects just look really good with that type of clay coloring or clay texturing. Another way that scrap clay comes in very handy is in lentil bead making or swirl beads, and these are very popular. And you can obviously take lumps of clay and brand new lumps of clay and make these types of things, but when you just grab scrap clay in hand and you just start kneading it around, and then you do your technique, you're going to get really random and beautiful striping and swirling. So that is one way to do it. This is called the Natasha, or the mirror image. If you look at this bangle, every section of the bangle has a mirror image, like an opening of a book. And so does this bead. On all four sides you get this mirror imaging, and scrap clay is perfect for this technique also. Another way to use scrap clay is in veneers. And if you have beautifully patterned clay but you don't have a lot left, you can use just the tiniest little strips. These pens are covered with strips of clay. This little mint box is done in just very small patterns of clay that came from veneers. Even these pendants that you could string and wear around your neck, they have very, very small stripes of veneers. And nothing is ever wasted with oven baked clay because you can just use it and use it. And some of those veneers are so pretty, you don't want to get rid of them. You just want to find a way, you know, to plan out a design that's going to use just the tiniest bit of a veneer. This bowl was done with really large veneers that were just, the sheet of clay was processed through the pasta machine, and I let it crackle to its heart's content, and then I cut out pieces and turned them when I put it back in, so it really looks like fabric. But this entire dish was made with scrap veneer on the top, and then all this beautiful clay that you see on the bottom, even with some fleck, mica, and glitter. This is all scrap clay that was produced through the pasta machine just to make this one-of-a-kind finish. All right, the first one I want to show you is just taking like a large amount of clay. I haven't handled this clay in a long time, so not really sure what the outcome will be. I've just had it in storage. Some of it even has silkscreen on it. Pieces that you've got silk screened are fair game if you have pieces of clay with little bits of paint in them. As long as that paint in there is dry, and it would be because this is scrap from a long time ago. I'm just going to take this ball out so we don't have to deal with it. You know, paint, glitter, anything that's in there. And so what I would do is just, I'm just kind of picking out and sorting if there's any weird colors in there that I don't want. And all I'm going to do is push this through the pasta machine on the thickest setting and see what happens. So I'll just use my hands to make sure the pieces are sticking together and they aren't, so it doesn't fall apart so much in the pasta machine. Another thing that you could do is just take your acrylic roller and kind of put some pressure on it to, you know, just help them get going together. What I like to do when I'm going to sheet things through the machine is start with the pieces that are the most solid in color. What I mean by that is there's large areas of red and coral, and there's big areas of purple. Pieces like this that have really a lot of stuff going on, I'll save those for the top layer. So I'm going to press some of these through first, and I'm just going on the thickest setting. And see how now all I've done is kind of made these solid together, and it's got a lot of breakage in here, and I think that's great because it's these broken areas that are going to allow other layers to show through. So now I've got it sticking together and it's starting to go into a sheet, and I'm going to put some of these other pieces, like this area had a ton of red, so I'm going to accentuate that red area with some, you know, more mottled colors. I'm just going to keep pushing these on top, and every once in a while you can go ahead and push it through again. Just keep doing this a few times. Okay, now what I'll do is fold this in half and run it through again to start getting the layers to stick together. And there again, you get a lot of those openings, but those openings are nice because they allow the other layers to show through. And here you get a lot of like cool crackling that's really hard to get with anything other than scrap clay. We have that here too. I'll probably just go one more time to get a nice sheet. And then you just have this beautiful piece that the back and the front are equally pretty, and that is exactly the type of thing I did to make, you know, these kind of really organic and uncontrolled patterns. Next, let's take a look at swirling colors together like you would if you want to make either lentil beads, or I call these lentil bowls. So I want to show you how to make one of these. There's a lot of tutorials out on lentil bead making, and it's just the same as I'm going to make the bowl, but in a smaller version. So to make a lentil bowl, what you want is kind of a lot of clay that is in a really good color, you know, way. And I've got like a palm full of this. It's a pretty big ball of scraps. And I need to get it working so that it's warm all the way through. So that's all I'm doing right now, is just conditioning in a manner that I don't want to mix the colors completely. I want the colors to still stay their true color, but I want some heat to get all the way through the ball so that I can make a really nice big lentil bead. Now that feels pretty good right there. Okay, so when you make lentil beads, it's real easy to make a lentil bead by using our Sculpey lentil bead maker. That's how I made these smaller ones. But if you want to make a lentil dish, like one of these that's quite a bit larger than a lentil bead, you're going to need something from your kitchen. So the best objects to use, depending on the size of the bowl you want to make, might be a glass pie pan or a glass plate. In this case, I have this glass ashtray, and you just want to make sure that it's clean, clear glass that you can see through, and that there isn't any like etching, like, you know, the Corningware or the name of the glass maker on the bottom. You just want it to be completely flat. And the reason we use glass is because you want to be able to look through it and see what's happening with the clay. So just make as round of a ball as you can, and then examine the ball and see where there's a lot of activity with color. Like this side has way more patterning than, say, this side has a cool streak, but not a lot else going. And this side has a lot of cool patterns. So I'm going to put it up facing me, like that's the top. And then what I'll do is just swirl this dish around. And you want to keep your dish super level to your work surface. And the first thing you're going to notice, I am applying some pretty good pressure here. The first thing you're going to notice is that your ball bead is going to turn into a bicone. And see how it has these 2 points, and then it has this nice rim around the edge. That's a bicone bead. And if you look at the tip, we're already getting this beautiful one-of-a-kind swirl pattern on the top. So what I want to do now is just continue with my swirling, and I need to bring it closer to me so I can be in better control. And actually I'm going to start again, because when you stop to look at the beautiful bicone, you kind of stop your progress, but I wanted you to see that, so we'll just go again. So you swirl, it doesn't matter which direction you swirl, but you want to swirl the same direction, you know, throughout the whole process. And you're going to make that bicone, and then you're going to get to a point where it's a lentil. When you get to the lentil stage, since I'm making kind of a bigger dish, what I want to do is really flatten this out with my clear dish, and now I can look through it and see my beautiful swirl pattern. And then what I want to do is just peel this off of the dish. Okay. And then what I want to do is take a look at what I've produced, and on this side there's a lot of color and swirling. On this side it has a lot of color and swirling too, but you just need to decide which one is going to be the inside of the dish, because the inside of the dish is the one that you will always see the most. And so for that reason, I think I'll go with this side. And next what I'm going to do is roll this just a little flatter so it gets bigger. This is about how thick it is. It's over 1/4 inch thick, I think, especially on this side. So I'm just going to roll it a bit until it's not quite that thick. All right, now that I have like this thick patty made, I can apply it to a bowl form. And this is a metal hemispherical baking bowl. It's for making like soccer ball cakes and basketball cakes and things. You can also use a glass dish, anything that'll go in the oven and has a very smooth surface. That's what you want to use for your form. And I like these this type of material, it's sort of a brushed aluminum and it won't leave any markings on the clay. So all I'm doing is finessing the sides of the lentil piece of clay down to the bowl. And then once I have it really on there nicely, what I'm going to do is go around and I'm going to use my thumb and I'm going to move the edge of the clay over so that it really fits tight to the bowl. That way, what we're doing is forming a nice little thin lip. If I leave it this way, the way it is right here, that would make a really thick lip. And that could be kind of a nice look. It just depends on what you're going for in your finished product. But I want this to have a thin lip, so I'm just showing you how to really put some finger pressure on there all the way to the bowl. And then when you get all the way around, you're just going to check that your edge is smooth with your fingertips. Smooth out all those little inconsistencies that we created by putting that finger pressure. Now at this point, if you wanted the bottom of your bowl to have a texture, like this one actually has a texture, you could use a texture sheet all over the bottom. This one also has a texture on the bottom of it. You could use stair tread or a texture sheet or a rubber stamp. Anything that makes a nice mark in clay is fair game. Okay, now this bowl has a really flat little bottom on it so that it sits nicely on the desk. So the way you get that is you just flip this over clay side down, you let it rest, and then apply hand pressure exactly as the bowl is. Then I do this little bit of a jig back and forth like so. And then when I lift it from the work surface, you can see that there's a really nice foot right there. If you want a tiny foot, you can just push a little bit and it'll make a small foot. Or if you want a larger foot like this one, you can push deeper. That's ready to go in the oven, and when it's all done, you just pop it off and finish it how you would like. Let's take a look at these two. This one has this really thick rim on it, which looks nice for this organic shape, but this one has more of a pinched rim, and so that's how thin that looks. And I did the same thing for this bowl, except I gave it a little pedestal foot. And this bowl, even though it's square, was still formed over one of those dishes to make a nice, nicely shaped square dish. All right, next let's take a look at how to do this Natasha technique, and that is the mirror image technique. So what you want to do is take some clay that you want your clay colors to have a lot of contrast. You don't want your clay colors to be muted with this one. You want those contrasting colors in there because the contrast and the deep dark colors is what really plays out, you know, that mirror image look. So all I want to do is just grab some of this clay, and I'm not going to be real picky about it. I'm just grabbing some of this scrap clay that has lots of contrast. It's got white and black and super bright colors, and I'm just getting it moving with my hands. So let me get this out of the way. And I actually want to sort of knead this a bit. And then I'll just roll it a bit and give it a slight twist. This is really jumbled up in there, so you don't have to work with it as much as you do just solid colors of clay because it's already pre-mixed. But I am going to give it one fold so that I get a lot of that good black that you see on the outside. I want to make sure there's some of that on the interior, so I'm going to give this a nice fold, and that will probably be enough. Next, you want to form this clay to kind of the shape of a bead or whatever the item is that you want. And so if I form the clay like this, it will turn out to be sort of a rectangular shaped bead. And I'm going to make this kind of big so that you can see the details when I slice it open. I'm just going to keep on you know, really working with this with my fingers. What I'm trying to do is get this into sort of a a square bead shape so that from the end you have a square bead profile. I want to point out that when I made this bracelet, because it's a long piece of clay, I wouldn't work in this method. I would work in a really long rope so that when I cut it open I have enough length of clay to actually form a bracelet. Okay, the only reason I keep working it is because I still have kind of a crease right here and a crease right here, so I want to keep working those into a flat situation. Okay, that looks like it has really nice square corners. I'm just checking the corners with my fingers. So this is sometimes called a Natasha bead because someone named Natasha figured this out, and I apologize that I don't know that person's last name. But since then, people have also gone on to call it a mirror image bead, which also, just because that makes sense. All right, now what we want to do is take a really sharp blade and cut down through the middle. And then we're just going to open this up like a book. And the pattern that's revealed on the inside is going to be an exact mirror image of itself. And then what we want to do is just reposition each side, the left and the right side, back together so that you get that that double pattern. Now this would be beautiful for a veneer or for making a pendant. You could use this just as it is. But if you want to make a bead that you have that same cool mirror image pattern on all four sides, we need to do a little bit more. For example, this bracelet was just book opened, and then that's why you have these swirls on the edges. But I want to make a four-sided mirror image, so I'm going to keep going. And what we do next is cut down through the middle of each, the left and the right side. So I can just visually, cut that left and right side in half, and then what you do is open these up. Then if I turn this and regroup these, I have yet another beautiful mirror image pattern, but it's completely different than the first one. And if I rebuild it over here, I have another image pattern that's even different from the other two. So it's almost like super cool wallpaper. And then you want to double check the back because it also has the beautiful mirror image pattern as well. And so that is your mirror image technique for doing all four sides. And then at this point you could trim it, you could trim the ends, you could drill it with one of your bead reaming tools and turn it into a mirror image bead. Okay, let's take a look next at making something out of scrap veneers. And remember in the beginning when I showed you how to make this piece through the pasta machine, this is actually becomes a veneer. And what I mean by the word veneer is that it's just a very thin sheet of clay that can be applied either over to other scrap pieces of clay, or it can be built up like this. These are all little veneers, just very tiny scraps of pieces that I've collected and hung on to because they were too pretty to wad up. So those are how you can use veneers. And I want to show you another way that you can use veneers from scrap. So this is really a scrap sheet of clay right here. What I did was I had all this white clay that I just assembled little bits and colors of other bright colors of clay onto, and then process it through my pasta machine. So if I fold this sheet in half and go through the machine on the thickest setting, and then I could take it down one, and I can take it down again, and you can see how those scraps just keep stretching if I keep thinning it. Another way the scraps will stretch is if I fold it in half again and keep thinning it. And you can keep doing this as much as you want until you get those colors as blended or not blended as you want. And you can see this is quite thin. This is less than 1/8 of an inch thick. There's a lot of pretty activity going on there in that piece. It makes a really pretty useful veneer, something you certainly wouldn't want to throw away. This is a very similar piece that I cut some flowers out of. I have some little cutters here that I'd like to just show you what I mean by cutting veneers. So let's say I want to cut into this, and I'll just use a circle cutter for the example. I'm going to take that piece out and I'm going to turn it and put it back in. Now you have something with a lot more interest. It's almost like making your own quilting fabric. And if I take another cutter and I cut through here, and then I take these pieces out and turn them and put them back in, it's super cool because it's the same clay, but now the stripes don't line up, and you're just creating this really neat, one-of-a-kind pattern that only you would have, because it came from scraps and it comes from your imagination, the way you cut and turn these. So you could do this with any shape of cutters that you have, whether it be flowers or circles or squares, whatever kinds of shapes you have on hand, you just cut them out and turn them. And that is how this little dish is created, by cutting and turning flowers and leaves, and then adding some details with my tools. And I already mentioned that the back of this was made with scrap clay as well, and so it just creates a really unique, one-of-a-kind piece. And then if you have leftover strips from veneers like this, you can just cut thin strips and just wrap them around Bic pens. You'll be sure to take the ink out first, wrap it around the barrel and bake it, and you get all kinds of super unique and beautiful gifts that you can share with others. So I hope that you are able to use your scrap clay and enjoy it as much as I certainly do. And we would love to see what you make with scrap clay, and be sure and tag us, Sculpey, anytime you post to social media.